This time to the Atlanta Falcons. I've got my guy Suneil back on it again with a new setup, and we're going to be talking about the 49ers heading into this Chiefs game and whether they should trade for Christian McCaffrey all after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on 3. 1, 2, 3, dominate.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here with another episode of the 49ers RedZone podcast. You guys can follow me on Twitter. My name's Rohan Chakravarthi. I'm here with my guy Suneil. Before we get started, Suneil, how you doing, my man?
Doing fantastic, man. We haven't done a show together in a couple of weeks, so I'm glad we got back at it, man.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely glad we got back at it. It's going to be a fun show, a fun hour. So thank you guys for everybody who's coming in. First, got to give a shout out to Niner Sickness Podcast, Beto, for always coming in with the support, man. Appreciate you always, and keep going with your show. But starting off with the 49ers, man, another disappointing loss, this one to the Atlanta Falcons, who, as I said earlier last week, this game should not be taken as lightly as many thought. I didn't think it was going to be as easy as it was, and it proved to be that case, and to a greater degree than many expected. The Falcons win 28-14. Looking at it, what are your kind of initial takeaways from the game? What did you think about it?
So I agree and disagree with what you just said, Rohan. It should have been a very easy victory for the 49ers. However, knowing the 49ers track record with the makeup of what the Atlanta Falcons are, anybody that's paying attention would know that they would struggle with this team, right? Because the Achilles heel of the 49ers is a mobile quarterback, and Mariota is a mobile quarterback. The 3 losses that the 49ers have on the season are all to a similar type of quarterback that's able to break containment and make plays make plays on the move. And that's kind of what happened as well. So as far as like major takeaways, I mean, the 49ers once again are self-inflicted wounds, right? The 3 turnovers, losing the turnover battle by 3 is a recipe for disaster, right? All 3 games that they've lost the turnover game. You know, maybe there's a correlation there. So if they're not playing a clean brand of ball, the inability for this team to score consistently throughout the game is once again something that came up. Once again, a common trend to what leads to their losses. And then obviously the injuries to the defense allowed for this defense to give up just a little bit more than what they're used to giving. I still think they played well enough for this team to win. They kept the Atlanta Falcons under their average and held them to 21 points. And that's with 7-8 starters missing at certain points in the game. So for me, once again, it's the same Achilles heel of this team. Defensively, not being able to contain or stop a mobile quarterback, and offensively, just the ineptness of being able to score, right? If this defense isn't a top 3 defense, this team is going to struggle to win because the offense hasn't proven to be anything more than a bottom tier offense right now.
And I mean, I don't think you can make an argument against it that this offense is a bottom half offense right now. When you look at the scoring, right? I mean, scoring is down in the NFL this year in general, but the 49ers are scoring just 20 points per game. That's a meager amount. And you have to also factor in that 2 of those touchdowns that they've scored so far came from the defense. Talanoa Hufanga and Emmanuel Mosley with an interception. So really, yeah, the offense has sputtered. And to me, this is an intriguing topic when you talk about the sputtering offense, because many just, when something's not going well, what do people do? Point blame. So many want to point blame at Shanahan. Jimmy Garoppolo is obviously the number 1 candidate for blame normally. point blank Shanahan, Garoppolo, at the normal faces to try and figure out a way to absolve this loss because it's a disappointing loss. The 49ers, and the bad part is the 49ers are never not in a game. They always make the game competitive, which is why fans believe they should be able to win the game because I mean, it's not a trend that happens this year, just this year. They remain competitive in games to give you enough that they can win the game, but in losses, they fall short, be it they lose leads or they can't overcome a lead. So to me, I think that it's definitely interesting because this year I think has been unlike others. Kyle Shanahan's had to respond to the issue of obviously losing Mike McDaniel, people making those comparisons, those bold comparisons the first 3 weeks in that McDaniels was the missing piece in San Francisco. I don't know if that really is the case, but overall, it's definitely been not new water, but an area of concern for the 49ers this far.
Yeah, and I think people just forget, Rohan, like if you put up the stats from this year and last year when McDaniel was here, this is the same offense, same inconsistency, very similar scoring pattern. Like I think Jesse from Last Second Sports put up on his Twitter, like the half scoring of this year and last year, and it was pretty damn similar when you look at it. This has been a constant trend for the offense throughout Kyle Shanahan. And I think you have the reprieve from the 2019 season where the offense actually played really decent, but the anomaly there was how great that rushing attack was. They had that three-headed monster. Luckily, those running backs were able to stay healthy. They ranked, I think they finished off like the second ranked rushing attack in the league. But outside of that 2019 year, which people keep holding on to this whole like, that's what the Kyle Shanahan offense is. It's true. That's the capability of what the offense could look like. However, they haven't been able to recreate that. And I think that, I mean, we're going to talk about, what solutions are in the future, but I think that the reality is you have to look at this offense and it's always been inconsistent. It's always struggled to play a complete game. They're either scoring only in the first half or only in the second half. We've mentioned the fourth quarter woes of this team in playoff games and during the season as well. Like this has not been a very good offense under Kyle Shanahan. And honestly, if you look at the rankings, they've been in the bottom half of the league more than the top half of the league under Kyle Shanahan. So the success obviously is probably a little bit more than what the rankings and what the offense has done, just because the defense has carried this team for so long.
Yeah. And I mean, when you talk about the rankings under Kyle Shanahan, many will now point to Kyle Shanahan, this offensive genius. Is he really the problem? And we'll get to that in a little bit. But specifically in 2022, a big area of decline for the offense has been the running game. No Elijah Mitchell for the entirety of the year. He had 6 carries and then got injured in week 1. But overall, the running game has struggled. They rank 29th since Jimmy Garoppolo entered the phase in expected points added, EPA per play. They rank 29th currently in the NFL. And overall, that running game with Jeff Wilson Jr. has really struggled to create consistent offensive flow. They have had chunk plays. Wilson has had rushes of 37 yards, 32 yards, 41 yards in 3 different games this year, but they've struggled to consistently create offense on that side of the field. And so I've got to ask you, do you think it's smart with the rumors circling right now? Should the 49ers trade for Christian McCaffrey?
Yeah, and first off, my answer is hell yes. And we'll talk a little bit more about why. So I appreciate that you put context into the rushing attack with Jeff Wilson Jr. because stat geeks are going to go and say Jeff Wilson Jr. is averaging 4.5 or 4.6 yards per carry, and he's you look at the yardage and the touchdowns and all that kind of stuff, and it looks like he's having a pretty decent season. But when you actually put context around where those yards are coming from, it's really like he has one explosive play per game that makes up the chunk of his yards and carries his average. But if you're looking at
Yeah.
the actual impact and how he's able to help the flow, like you put it, of the game, it's been very, very minimal. And there's this narrative that Kyle Shanahan doesn't need supreme talent at the running back position and they'll be able to have success. And once again, I put it all back to 2019. 2019 was the year that they were able to like catch lightning in the bottle with a guy like Tevin Coleman and then undrafted guys like Raheem Mostert and Matt Breida, right? And because of that success that they had, and obviously they made it to a Super Bowl, now everybody thinks that's just what you could do, right? And so we don't need to have a supreme talent at the running back position. We could do it with Elijah Mitchell. We could do it with Jeff Wilson. We could do it with Jordan Mason and insert any of these type of running backs that people are just like, we could just do it with these guys. It's just Kyle Shanahan isn't giving them a chance. I disagree with that, Rohan. Like there's a reality about why certain guys get drafted in certain rounds and why certain guys don't get drafted in certain rounds. And I think one of the biggest differences is going to be durability and just experience and ability to play being able to play all three downs, meaning you have the prowess to block in the passing game, so you could be there all three downs. And the other is the ability to take on the amount of punishment an every down back is going to be. And Kyle Shanahan continues to try to take these guys that are undrafted and lower drafted guys and make them into that every down back. And we've seen the same trend out of all of them. Raheem Mostert out, never able to consistently depend on him to be able to play. Now all of a sudden Elijah Mitchell, same thing. You can't consistently like expect him to be healthy and be able to play. And I don't think it's lack of ability in the sense these guys obviously have shown success in this system with their speed and their ability to run the ball. But durability is something completely different. So even though people want to point to Christian McCaffrey the last few seasons hasn't been able to stay healthy, I still believe he's a big upgrade over what the 49ers have. He's been able to stay healthy this whole year. It's not like he hasn't had a string of healthy seasons. His first 3 years in the league, he was able to be healthy. And then all of a sudden, Carolina just depleted all talent on their team. And the whole offense was Christian McCaffrey. And he was getting not only all the touches in the rushing game, but he was also getting so many touches in the passing game. I think if the 49ers are able to make that move, Rohan, he would be a part of this offense and not the whole offense like he was in Carolina. And that would be able to help him, stay healthy throughout the season versus all the punishment he's going to take being the only option like he is in Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think your point is really good about the running game. You talk about when I brought up the chunk plays, you talk about how a majority of Jeff Wilson Jr.'s yardage in games comes from those chunk plays. He has one chunk play a game, to which I attribute to Kyle Shanahan's genius. It's Jeff Wilson Jr. and his ability to hit the hole. And I've praised Jeff Wilson Jr. this year. I think he's played well in several games, and it hasn't been necessarily his fault always that the running game isn't functioning to the caliber that the 49ers normally want. But this year, the 49ers efficiency has been pretty putrid compared to past seasons when you talk about the running game. With Jimmy Garoppolo at the helm, starting from week 3 to week 6, the 49ers have ranked 29th in rushing efficiency according to EPA per play. It's a really good metric when you're kind of gauging the overall metric for a team. It's not good for a certain player, but it's good for the team because it tells you the amount of points added that play can get you. And so that's where efficiency matters. And I think it's a strong metric. They rank 29th right now in that. Also, the 49ers, when Trey Lance was playing with Trey Lance, in 49 attempts, the 49ers averaged 5.8 yards per carry with Trey Lance in the first 2 games. And keep in mind, the 49ers averaged 9 yards per carry in week 2 against Seattle, with Trey Lance rushing only 3 times of the 12 attempts. It's not like Lance is the majority of this rushing game. The thing though is he provided so much. Kyle Shanahan came into the season operating under zone read. It wasn't for Lance to just run the football. I don't think that was his intention at all. But you cannot deny that Trey Lance's ability to at least rush, or his ability, the threat that he possesses with his legs, does not further the offense. The statistics prove it. The offensive metrics prove it. And so that was what was prolonging this 49ers offense early. Enters Jimmy Garoppolo. That efficiency from 5.8 yards per carry drops to 3.87 yards per carry. We've seen a significant decline, and it's not only because of the change in quarterbacks, but also because of the lack of availability of Elijah Mitchell. With Elijah Mitchell, the 49ers had a multifaceted rushing attack. The ability to hit the outside zone and the ability to hit the inside zone. Now, that rushing attack has been centralized to the inside zone because Jeff Wilson Jr., Tyrion Davis-Price, or, I mean, regardless of who it was this year, those have been the two main running backs. They don't have the ability to hit the
Coleman
edge.
as well.
Tevin Coleman, but he has really been inefficient in his time here with 49ers. I don't count him. And while he's shown the ability to hit the edge, he doesn't show the vision or the decision-making necessary. So to me, I think the issue is the 49ers have just a sole focus on offense with the running game right now. And that's what's the predictability. The play calling has been fine. The play calling isn't the issue. It's the personnel and it's the execution because the 49ers are depleted at running back. And this is where the 49ers back in 2019, they have experienced a dip in efficiency from 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. The reason being they've shied away from that running back by committee. In 2019, you had a running back committee, and it's not only to keep players healthy, but it's also to utilize several different kind of rushes into your system, outside zone and inside zone, keeping defenses on their feet. You have shied away from that because of injury, pretty much, that you've had to lead on a bell cow back. Elijah Mitchell in 21, Jeff Wilson in 22, and that has attributed to the decline in the running game.
How do you feel about the team bringing on a guy like CMC?
I think it'd be a brilliant move. If obviously we'll talk about the trade capital and the actual trade itself and that part in a bit, but I think it'd be a brilliant move. The 49ers, and when you talk about Christian McCaffrey, he is one of the most team-friendly contracts that you can envision. His base salary for this year is only $1.3035 million because he had a restructure in the offseason. Many are saying, oh my God, McCaffrey's 4 years, $64 million contract is horrible. No, it is horrible for the Panthers, but not horrible. But it's bad for the Panthers, but not for opposing teams. Opposing teams don't take on the guaranteed salary that McCaffrey is owed. That is attributed to the Panthers, and that won't change. Instead, they take on the $1.035 million for this year, and then a 3-year, $35.6 million contract for the next 3 years, with only $1 million guaranteed over the entire contract. That is an extremely team-friendly deal. If the 49ers believe the investment's not worth it, they can cut him in the offseason and only lose $1 million over the next 3 seasons, as opposed to what many expect him to be owed. I think for a player of his caliber, a player who has shown that he's an efficient running back this year and has the ability to not only hit the edge, but be utilized as a wide receiver out of the backfield, which we've seen work with Deebo Samuel, I think the overall factor just makes it a great move, especially when you understand what Kyle Shanahan's been able to do with running backs with the depleted rosters that he's had.
That makes it even more appealing to me. The fact that, the money isn't going to be as crazy as it might look. And, I think, I wrote an article for SI Rohan I think it was 2 years ago when they ended up going with Kinlaw. I said that they should have drafted, or maybe it was the year Najee Harris came out. So I forget what year that was. But my whole article was that the 49ers need to give up on this whole narrative that you don't need a top running back to have success in this offense. Like that you can just settle for lesser caliber running backs, guys that are undrafted, guys that are lower draft picks. And people keep going back to Elijah Mitchell's year, or like even Jeff Wilson had a year a few years ago that was really good. Like the effect, or the ability for running backs to produce in this type of system, regardless of the talent. To me, I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, if you can take somebody that has maybe a lesser talent, quote unquote, based off of their draft position, and then put in somebody that's a supreme talent that's able to, that's drafted really, really high. What could this rushing attack actually look like with that type of level of talent? So you look at a guy like CMC who can run inside, can run outside, can catch the ball, and can be in the blocking attack. What Kyle Shanahan could do with that level of talent, to me, would be insane. And like I said, I don't even know, like, if CMC comes to this team, Rohan, he might still be the third or fourth option on this team based on the talent that's already there. So it's not like he's going to necessarily need to be the number one option like he's been where he started getting all of those injuries, right? He's still only 26 years old. His first 3 seasons in the league, he played all 16 games. Last 3 seasons, he's had struggled to stay on the field, but he's played 6 games this year and stayed healthy. So to me, I just think there's a lot of reasons how he's going to benefit the 49ers by bringing him in. And there's another reason why I think the 49ers should bring him in, because the other team that's supposedly in contention for him is the Rams. So you're going to choose either to bring him in and have him on your team, or more than likely have to face him, in the future for the Rams. So for me, it's like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You make your team better, and then you keep a division rival away from the talent as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Christian McCaffrey and his talent, that's undeniable, right? And when you talk about the point about not needing star caliber running backs, I'll give one pushback on that. I think the 49ers can operate with the way that they've been operating, but it's only worked under one specific way. It's worked when not only have running backs been durable, but you have a multitude of running backs that can operate all forms of the rushing attack, the outside zone, the inside zone, so that your entire playbook's at your arsenal instead of Kyle Shanahan having to cut down on that arsenal. Because of the limitations that his running group provides, that's why Kyle Shanahan involved Trey Lance as much as he did in the run game. I'm not saying Kyle Shanahan trained Trey Lance into a runner. I think that narrative is completely false, and I've talked about that previously. But him utilizing Trey Lance in the running game made it 11-on-11 offense. And when you look at some of the most efficient rushing attacks and really overall offenses in the NFL, the Bills, the Eagles, the Ravens rank amongst the top 5. And all 3 of those quarterbacks utilize the zone read efficiently. So to me, I think that that's kind of what Kyle Shanahan was looking at. And to me, I think that this is also kind of a wake-up call for Shanahan now, if he doesn't acquire McCaffrey, to start utilizing Jordan Mason more in the rushing attack, not only because he deserves the opportunity, because he's been doing well whenever he gets the opportunity, but also because you need to diversify that running back room, and Tevin Coleman isn't cutting it. We've seen how his efficiency and his poor decision-making have costed the 49ers now on certain occasions. I know he had 2 touchdowns in one game, but last week he was not good. And overall, that juice, it's still questionable. If he can really navigate himself and start hitting the outside zone on a consistent basis, 49ers are in good hands. But we haven't seen that yet. And so that's why I'm saying you need to diversify the room to make it easier on players like Coleman and on Shanahan himself. So I think Christian McCaffrey, going back to the topic, would be a great grab for the 49ers because he adds to the running room, and because I still believe the 49ers should utilize a committee. You preserve his health by not utilizing him as much, while also maximizing efficiency offensively by incorporating the entirety of your playbook.
Can I push back a little bit on this narrative that, because I know a lot of people are getting upset with Kyle Shanahan and not utilizing certain running backs in his roster. And let's right now it's Jordan Mason, right? So here's my thing. I think it's fully fair to criticize Kyle Shanahan's ability to find the right running back through the draft. I think that, the running backs that he's picked in the top 3 rounds are guys that he isolated and said, these are the guys that I want. And we've seen it, that most of them haven't panned out. Very few of them on the team. TDP is the only one left, right? Most recently, Trey Sermon lasting a year on the team and then getting traded away. And you see these running backs have a little bit of success, and then you're like, okay, well, why is Kyle Shanahan not utilizing them, right? People are looking at Jordan Mason's preseason and offseason, right? But the one thing that I think Kyle Shanahan does very, very well is know what the talent that's on his team that he's seeing every single day. And the way that I could prove it, Rohan, is name the player that left Kyle Shanahan's system. Let's focus on running backs that left Kyle Shanahan and went out there and proved Kyle Shanahan wrong for not utilizing them.
I don't think you can, right? I mean, at least in the last couple of years, Jerick McKinnon hasn't done anything. Tevin Coleman didn't do anything when he left the 49ers. Who else is there?
Trey hasn't done anything. Trey Sermon.
Breida hasn't done too much. Yeah. Trey Sermon hasn't done much. I mean,
Raheem
the only one
Mostert.
you could probably say is Mostert because he's had a solid year, but he was way more efficient under Kyle Shanahan for sure.
Yeah. He wasn't. He's nowhere near what he was looking like with the 49ers, right? So I just don't. I push back on. There's this narrative that Kyle Shanahan doesn't know what he's doing, right? And I get it because this offense is terrible. Like, it's not good. And so clearly, the offensive genius and all that kind of stuff, you absolutely have to put some blame on him. But I do think he knows a lot, and especially when it comes to running backs. And if he's not using a guy like Trey Sermon, which I was like, why aren't you using Trey Sermon? Well, now we know why, right? And now it's Jordan Mason, right? People are like, why don't you use Jordan Mason? Well, I think we'll probably find out why if Jordan Mason actually played or if he goes to another team, because I find it hard to believe that Kyle Shanahan sees this unbelievable talent and is just like, we're not going to play him when the rushing attack looks the way that it looks and the offense looks the way that it looks, right? I think he put the best weapons
The only
there.
thing is last year. Let's just use last year as an example. Elijah Mitchell looked better in training camp than Trey Sermon, right? And who did Kyle Shanahan end up playing? He played Elijah Mitchell. This year, Jordan Mason looked better than Davis Price and looked better than Trey Sermon in training camp and in the preseason. But, I mean, he made the right move. I don't know if, at least right now, you can say he made the right move in cutting Trey Sermon. But he hasn't played Jordan Mason yet, despite him playing well during his opportunities. Even his one carry so far, he got 7 yards on the carry, and he navigates well. He hits the hole. He's a Kyle Shanahan type of running back. So I don't disagree that he doesn't know what he's doing. I think that that's false. I think that that's preposterous, really, given how you see this offense play. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But to me, I believe that Jordan Mason does deserve carries. And I believe that regardless of whether it's going to be a positive or negative experience, with the way that the running game is operating right now, you need to switch it up. You need to make it more diverse. And I think that the prime solution is utilizing the one guy you haven't utilized on your roster, because he's probably the fastest running back on the team, or at least the most explosive running back on the team. So I
agree. I mean, I'm with you.
Put into place.
Sorry. I'm with you. I want Jordan Mason to get more carries. I just think there's a reason. I think that there's something there that we're not seeing, because I think it's not just that he's a rookie. You know what I mean? Like, I think that especially with the way the rushing attack looks right now, if he felt like Jordan Mason is going to significantly increase the efficiency of this rushing attack, I think he'd use him. But I don't know what that is. I think I have more faith in Kyle Shanahan than a lot of people do right now. Maybe I'm naive to it, but for me, I think that they should go after CMC because it moves everybody else down. So now you have CMC as the main bell cow. Now when Elijah Mitchell gets back, he doesn't need to carry the ball 12, 15 times. You could keep him healthier. Jeff Wilson Jr., if he ends up being the third guy, he only needs 3 to 5 rushes, so he could just have his one chunk play and then ease out the rest of the game. I think it's just I think that we just need more talent at the running back room. I think we've tried this whole lesser talented guys and keeping it afloat, and this offense has been inconsistent. Even when they're playing well, even when this team is winning, I should say, the offense is still inconsistent. It hasn't reached that peak of 140 yards per game that we saw in 2019. It's really been middle of the pack ever since that 1 year. At least like maybe 8 to 12, I should say, as far as rushing attack. So I don't know. I just think I just think that a CMC addition will make this offense look much better.
If you're talking about talent though in the running game, this offseason's that year. Barkley, Kareem Hunt, Rashad Penny, I believe Josh Jacobs, guys like Melvin Gordon, Miles Sanders. There are a ton of free
Mhm.
agents. But let's get into some of these comments. Sean here says, I think we abandoned our run game far too early in games. Run game takes time to establish, and our offensive line needs to own the trenches. What are your thoughts kind of on this type of sentiment?
I agree. I agree with Sean. I mean, you would want to stay consistent with the rushing attack. I think when you fumble the ball, like Jeff Wilson Jr. did, uh, and kind of change the dynamic of the game, I think Kyle Shanahan tends to sometimes outthink himself. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that the propensity to get away from the running game when there are these kind of things that are happening, whether it be fumbles or lack of efficiency and things of that nature, I it would be nice to see just keep doing it. But if the rushing attack is super inefficient and you keep sticking with it and it doesn't work, people are gonna be like, why are you still sticking with this? Why aren't you switching it up and all this kind of stuff? So it's kind of like a two-edged sword. Like if he feels like it's not gonna work and he strays away from it, it's because if it didn't work, all of a sudden the criticism would be like, well, why did you stick with it? You can't tell that you're only getting 2 yards per carry or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, for me, I think that this statement is interesting. I kind of disagree, and here's why. A lot of people talk about abandoning the run game, and a lot of people talk about, this narrative that you have to run the football 30 times if you're the 49ers with this personnel if you're going to win football games. I disagree with both. I don't think that there's a set amount, and I think teams more than ever are starting to adapt to the 49ers and how they run. Why? Because Jimmy Garoppolo is now under center for his 5th consecutive year. They understand his tendencies. There's a reason that the 49ers are being defended as they are. Jimmy Garoppolo is throwing more deep passes. He's pretty much throwing more big time throws according to PFF than ever in his career. He's currently top 5 in big time throw percentage at 5.1%, by far the most of his career. As a result, you'd expect defenses to play more conservative and defend the deep pass because he's being more accurate and more consistent in throwing that type of ball. No, teams are actually stacking the box more than ever against the 49ers. Jeff Wilson Jr. currently faces a top 3 ranking in 8 players in the box in the league. The other 2 are, I believe, Saquon Barkley and I forget the second guy. I think it might be Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry. But those 2 are dominant running backs. Jeff Wilson is not. Why are the 49ers or why are opposing teams doing this? Because they understand the limitations of the offense. If you just consistently start running the football, especially with the personnel that you have right now, I don't think you face any success, and I think you even decrease the amount of offensive opportunities. The issue with the offense right now is execution. It isn't that you're abandoning the run game. It isn't that it's play calling. Play calling has honestly been the most underrated part of this year because people always want to blame play calling when the offense isn't working. Instead, to me, it's execution. You see so many big plays and so many regular plays in general just not being executed properly, limiting the 49ers offensive opportunities. And I'm not saying just about this game. I'm saying in every single game this year, including the wins, including the win against Carolina last year. This game itself, you saw the Ray McCloud drop, stumble, whatever you want to call it. That was on Ray McCloud. You saw that one. You saw obviously the hold on Jake Brendel that negated the big Brandon Ayuk play. You saw the other play to Charlie Warner right over the middle. And those are just the 3 plays that you can see on TV. There are several plays when you watch the film that consistently show the execution isn't there, be it on the quarterback, the offensive line, or the receivers. I think at some point, all 3 of those facets have underwhelmed this year. And so it's unfortunate but that's the reason the 49ers are losing games. And at some point, execution does fall on the head coaches too, because you consistently are putting the players out there that are failing to execute. And so that's an issue as well.
So yeah, and I think that's like the major pushback right now that a lot of people are saying. They're saying, like, why is Charlie Warner out there instead of Ross Dwelly? Why is Ray McCloud out there instead of Danny Gray, right? Maybe if you have the right personnel out there, those plays actually turn into completions and big momentum changers. At least specifically, we're talking about the last game. You kind of mentioned it that is on the coach, but what I guess what would you say about Kyle Shanahan and his use of personnel? Because I think that's where a lot of people are, quote unquote, where's this genius? Like, it seems pretty similar to be, it seems pretty sane to be like, well, Ross Dwelly is better than Charlie Warner when it comes to catching the ball. Why aren't you making that play to Ross Dwelly? Or Brandon Ayuk should be running that route, or Danny Gray, who you got to be the burner. Then Ray McCloud. Why is Ray the guy that you're throwing out there? So for people that are fans that are like, well, that's the issue with Kyle Shanahan, how would you answer that?
I think it's not only, I mean, it's a twofold part. For me, I want to make it clear, I'm not fully blaming Kyle Shanahan. I only think a partial amount of the blame should go, because if you're on that field, you should be able to execute the play when it's given to you. On open plays like that, the one that went right through Dwelly's hand or Warner's hands, the one where obviously McCloud ran a poor route and then stumbled before showing an inability to end up making that play. You got to be able to make those plays. But to me, for those saying that that's Kyle Shanahan's biggest issue, you have to understand your personnel. If Brandon Ayuk ran that route that Ray McCloud ran, it's going to be a similar coverage. It wasn't like Ray McCloud was wide open. No, he was in double coverage at first. He had the cornerback that was playing underneath, and then as he went into the second level of the defense, he was picked up by a safety. Garoppolo just led him very well into a place that was protected against the defense. And then for the Charlie Warner and Ross Dwelly play, I would play Ross Dwelly there. Ross Dwelly doesn't drop the football. We know that. He's one of the most surefire players in terms of hands on the team. And I think sometimes it's overthinking. Obviously, if Charlie Warner's on a play, defenses might anticipate that it's a blocking play, maybe a screen, which opens up different facets of the field. But if Charlie Warner's in the slot and not as an inline blocker, I don't know how much value he has as a blocker on that play. I don't know how much of a decoy that he possesses on that play. So instead, why not go with the better route runner and the more surefire hands guy in Ross Dwelly? I don't think defenses would react differently, and I think you end up with that same play because either player isn't the bigger threat on that play. The bigger threat on that play is George Kittle. It's a high to low scheme. The defense collapsed on George Kittle. They bracketed him, had a double coverage with the guy over the middle and the guy covering George Kittle, leaving that open seam for the tight end, that second tight end. If that's Ross Dwelly, that's a catch. But these are just a couple of plays. I think that the lack of execution happens consistently, and it's also due to the personnel, be it due to injury or be it due to whoever's on the field.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if the results aren't, I was telling Jesse last night when I was on his show, the 49ers go out and beat Kansas City this week, all of a sudden, all of these criticisms are going to go away from a majority of the people that are criticizing. Yeah. The last 2 weeks, nobody was really saying Shanahan was this terrible play caller and all this kind of stuff. It's obviously
that's why I say it's underrated, right? Because when we win, it goes away, but when we lose, it doesn't. And I think Shanahan's been very consistent with his play calling all year. Like I said, I think it's honestly been underrated this year with the amount of hatred that he's gotten because of the lack of execution.
Right.
Moving on with these comments, going forward, Sean here says, if we don't fix our offensive line problems, it doesn't matter who runs the rock. But we need that. I love McCaffrey. We need the offensive line to improve. They aren't terrible, but we need to get better. What are your thoughts on this? And just the offensive line in general and their performance this year.
Yeah, I mean, this is another part of the offense or part of the team overall that I think is getting way too much blame. Like, the offensive line has played relatively well. Like, Aaron Banks is playing extremely well. I think he's not allowed. He's not allowed. Definitely not allowed any sacks. And I think it's like very limited pressures, if not close to zero
Yeah.
pressures as well. Like it's insane the level that he's playing at. I think Burford is, it was playing better initially, and now, they're kind of doing spot duty between him and Brunskill. I don't know how much I like that. It's going to be interesting now that McGlinchey is down, like if he's going to be, how much time he's going to miss and all that kind of stuff. But overall, I think the offensive line has played relatively well. I don't think you could look to them and isolate them as that's the reason why this offense isn't executing and all that kind of stuff. I know Kate Santos puts up here that it's because Jimmy's release is, quicker, which is absolutely true. Jimmy Garoppolo is very elite when it comes to getting the ball out of his hands quickly. And I think Jimmy's done a great job keeping himself, clean as well, as far as some of his movement in the pocket. And, he's, even when he is getting pressured, he's been able to stand tall and make some decent throws out there as well. But I don't think that obviously, I don't think there's a team in the league that wouldn't say that they'd like their offensive line to be playing better. Like, it's just a normal type of thing. I don't necessarily think that the offensive line is this huge weakness there. I think it's something that was stuck in people's heads this offseason, Rohan, and they continue to just go back to it without actually looking at how the offensive line's playing, paying attention to how many games the Jimmy Garoppolo hasn't been sacked, and and the type of holes and things like that are being opened up, and the amount of pressures that are going out. So I wouldn't look at this offensive line and say that they're that big of a weakness.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think the offensive line has honestly been one of the like, it was seen as a potential weakness earlier in the year, like going into the year. I think it's a position of strength right now. The offensive line has honestly been good, apart from center, who's been inconsistent. Jake Brendel unfortunately has been inconsistent. His number one thing was in the run game. And when I talk about lacks of execution, when I'm mentioning the offensive line, it's normally about Jake Brendel, who sometimes does struggle. He gets pushed around in the run game on those plays that extend out to the tackles, and so that hole decreases, leading to a 1 yard gain instead of a 4 or 5 yard gain. I think that really might be the only current consistency issue. Aaron Banks has been good, as people like myself expected. He's been pretty darn good. He's probably been the best offensive lineman for the 49ers this year, given the injuries that they faced with Trent Williams and now Mike McGlinchey as well. But overall, when the unit's going to be healthy, it's going to be a pretty solid unit. Looking good. Reports just came out that Trent Williams will practice today. Unknown on Mike McGlinchey, but Williams practicing today is a pretty darn good sign for the 49ers.
Absolutely.
Now, the last kind of question on Christian McCaffrey: how much draft capital should the 49ers give up? Beto asked this here. It's a very good question. What do you think?
The one thing we complain about on this team consistently is how this offense keeps leaving the defense out to dry. And, this defense consistently keeping this team in games, and the offense not being able to take advantage of that. And I've also seen, Rohan, that the 49ers have been able to replace people on the defense much easier and quicker than they've been able to do that on the other side of the ball, right? I was like, man, Jaquiski Tart, how are we going to replace Jaquiski Tart? And then all of a sudden, Hufanga just is starting to play all out of his mind, and they were able to get him with a 5th round draft pick. Jimmy Ward is at, oh my God, how are they going to replace Jimmy Ward? And, Gibson comes out of nowhere. It wasn't even on the team, practice squad guy, all this kind of stuff, and is able to play, relatively decent. Like, there's been no real weaknesses there. K'Wan Williams, oh my God, one of the best slot corners that are there. How are we going to replace them? Diamador Lenore, Samuel Womack just come out of nowhere and are able to do that. So I'm not worried about if we end up having to lose certain defensive guys due to money or whatever the case may be. I feel like the 49ers have figured out how to replace those type of guys, other than like the Bosas and all that kind of stuff. So for me, what is the amount of draft capital I'd give up? I don't know if there's a limit, because at the end of the day, I would much rather solve the biggest issue that the 49ers have had, being consistently competitive, which is the offensive side of the ball. And I believe that CMC is a game changer. right? He makes this offense ridiculous. And so if it takes future picks, if it takes our second round and a third round pick to be able to do it, I say go for it, because you're not going to get better than him in the draft. Like, he's proven that he's an all-world talent. And I do know, like, a lot of people are like, well, he can't stay healthy. He can't stay healthy. Well, I think that he would be able to stay healthy with the 49ers. And at the end of the day, the guys that the 49ers have right now can't stay healthy. So why not bring in another guy that can at least be a game changer and move the needle? And that's what I'm really looking for. Who's going to move the needle? Is a rookie, a second round or third round pick, going to move the needle on offense for the 49ers? My answer would be no. And more than likely, the 49ers will pick the wrong person when it comes to offense, because they tend to do that when it comes to running back. So I'm down for a second round pick and a compensatory pick, especially with the way you broke down the contract. I don't think it's going to be that bad. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, the one thing that I wonder about Christian McCaffrey, if 49ers do trade for him, do they anticipate having him on the roster past this year? Like I said, his contract is 3 years, $35.56 million, about 11.8 to 12, somewhere around that million per year over the next 3 years. Only 1 million of it is guaranteed. So almost assuredly, I don't think McCaffrey plays on that contract next year, and I don't think the 49ers are going to keep that contract next year, not only because of the cost, but I do think McCaffrey is also going to want guaranteed money next year. But once again, the 49ers do have flexibility. When you talk about the move the Rams made to go all out last year, it was the second and the third for Von Miller. Has that move hurt them? Yeah, it has hurt them in the future, but they got the Super Bowl. To me, I think there is a cap. I would not move a first round pick for Christian McCaffrey, especially because that first round pick is going to be a 2024 first round pick. I wouldn't move a first for McCaffrey. What I'm looking at, the 49ers have a trio of third round picks this year because of their coaching situation. They get a third round pick because of the Robert Saleh hire. This is the second of that third round pick. And then they also get a third round pick for the Mike McDaniel hire. So they're going to get 2 extra third round picks on top of their own. I would not mind giving up a 2 or maybe even a trio of third round picks. I'd probably only hinge on 2 for third round picks, but I would not mind giving up a couple of those mid-round selections for Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's probably the best that they could get, right? Because you look at what the Rams could give. I don't even know if the Rams have a first-round pick this decade, right? Like, they give up first-round picks like crazy. I don't know what their draft capital is, so maybe they do have a better package that they could put out there. But I do think like 2 third rounds for Christian McCaffrey is something that that Carolina would be open to, because in reality, there's no reason for them to keep McCaffrey on the team.
Oh,
if
really?
anything,
I was going to say right after this, I think it's likelier that they keep him than not.
Well, I guess the only thing is like, I think they'd only keep him if they just got lowballed like crazy. Because the reality is they're in total rebuild mode. And by the time they get the quarterback that they need to be competitive, Christian McCaffrey's probably out of his prime. You know what I mean? And does Christian McCaffrey want to play another 2 years before the team gets good? Because right now they're probably going to be one of the worst teams in the league. So they're eyeing for one of those top quarterbacks in the draft this year. And usually it takes 2 years, 3 years before those quarterbacks can actually be competitive. And is Christian McCaffrey? Do you want to pay Christian McCaffrey what you're paying him when your team is probably not going to be competitive? And is Christian McCaffrey going to be the type of player that wants to continue in that? I think they'd be open to trading him, because it could be an unattainable situation, in a year or 2 from now. So rather trade him a year early than a year late, right?
The reason for me is the dead cap hit is $25 million if they trade Christian McCaffrey. So the cost would be heavy. And also because if they do get a new head coach, McCaffrey is obviously one of the more attractive assets and on a cheaper deal. That 3-year, $35.6 million deal, or whatever the deal may be, I think that would be fairly tenable for a new head coach. But that's good enough on the Christian McCaffrey note. Real quick, Sean's asking any news on when Trent Williams will be back. If you didn't hear earlier, Trent Williams is back at practice today. Optimistic because normally when they're limited on Wednesday and the game is on Sunday, that trends towards them playing. You'd be a little more worried if he was not practicing today or tomorrow. Already practicing today, that's a good sign for the 49ers. Moving forward, here's one that I wanted to talk about. John here talks about what the 49ers should do, and we can ignore the first part for now. But the second part, two positions I think we should pursue, cornerback or defensive tackle. Do you think the 49ers should make a mid-season move at either of the positions, or do you think they should make one at all?
I mean, there's some guys that are. I mean, speaking of Carolina Panthers, there's a defensive lineman there that you could bring over, but he's more of an edge than a tackle, right? Burns. But I mean, definitely stopping the run is something that the 49ers can get better at. And I guess the question is, do you believe how long is Armstead going to be out?
Yeah,
That's the big question, right? Because if they're being conservative with Armstead and holding him out because they want to keep him as healthy as possible moving forward, Armstead immediately solves that issue, right? So maybe you don't need to go after a D tackle. But if they're looking at Armstead and saying, Armstead is going to be the type of injury he has is going to be day to day, week to week. It could flare up again, and he might be in and out of the lineup the whole season. Then I think you need to, because you can't trust Kinlaw right there. He's already on IR, and even though the guys behind him are good, I don't know if are decent. I think they're better as replacement players or like guys that are coming off the bench to spell the starter versus actually being the starter. And so, I think that's what I'd base it off of. If Armstead is going to be in and out and not being able to play, I definitely think I would go for a D tackle. As far as a cornerback, I mean, to me, I'm banking that Verrett's going to be back, and I think that they have enough talent there in the cornerback room where they don't necessarily need to go out. I just don't know who's available. I would rather use my assets on a defensive tackle or Christian McCaffrey rather than a cornerback.
Yeah, to me, when you talk about these two on the realistic factor, I don't think cornerback is as realistic. The reason being the 49ers, I spoke about this with Jack Hammer last week. The 49ers have their insurance policy. It's Jason Verrett. The reason that they were prepared coming into the season is because even if Charvarius Ward or Emmanuel Moseley suffered an injury this year, they would have their backup waiting as insurance in Jason Verrett, who has proven to be a starting caliber corner when he's been on the field. And also, Charvarius Ward, Emmanuel Moseley both have not an injury history, but both have gotten injured. At least last year, Ward missed 4 games, Moseley missed 6 towards the end of the season. So it is good insurance, and I don't know if it'll be enough time for the 49ers to truly evaluate Jason Verrett before the trade deadline for them to splurge on a move and not show faith in the insurance that they invested in this offseason. To me, that's why I don't think they trade for a cornerback, because they have faith in Verrett as that guy, and at least because they want to see how the experiment goes before potentially making a move. I think that the one player that they could get back in that cornerback room that they have shown trust in before, not Dante Johnson, but he's already on the roster. I meant Darqueze Dennard, because Dennard, obviously, great mind according to the 49ers defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans, played in just 1.5 weeks last year, is still on the street. You could sign him. He could be a valuable acquisition to your team. I think that
they just brought in Kadar Holman too, which is a guy that
I think Kadar Holman's another guy. I think that's just as insurance to keep up, because remember in practice you're playing against a scout team defense as well, and I think that they just need ample bodies for it. So that's probably why. But I wouldn't be surprised if Dennard got re-signed later on if the 49ers needed more depth. But I don't think they made a move for a cornerback. I think defensive line, I would not be surprised if they made a Charles Omenihu-esque move. for a certain player along the defensive line because, yeah, those interior players is where they're getting a little scarce at. And I don't know if Akeem Spence is cutting it right now. He had extensive playing time this past week. Atlanta was able to run the ball. Great running team, but they were able to run the ball well for a portion of this game. So we'll see what they do. I think that this is an intriguing topic. I think defensive tackle is more likely, although I'm not sure if the 49ers are going to make a move given how well they insulated their depth this entire offseason.
Rohan, you're always crushing it, bro. You're always crushing it.
To end today off, we got to talk about Kyle Shanahan. And I mean, we talked about it earlier. Is Kyle Shanahan, though, is he holding the 49ers back? And where I'm referring to this, at the end of the game last week, Kyle Shanahan led an 8-minute drive without no huddle, without much urgency. And then when asking about it after the game, he believed that he'd have 2 more drives, essentially that he wanted the 49ers to capitalize on their opportunities, try and control the game, and then secure it with 2 extra drives after that. Do you think he's holding the 49ers back in that regard? And if not, do you think that he needs to improve in that way?
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan's game management has always been one of his bigger weaknesses. I wouldn't put it on the side of the strengths for Kyle Shanahan. So I do think that's a fair criticism that his game management sometimes could come into question. You could say the same about some of the playoff losses, about some of his decision making there when it comes to game management. But I think as far as the overall question, is Kyle Shanahan holding the 49ers back? I think that if there is a place where Kyle Shanahan is holding the 49ers back, it's been his indecisiveness at certain positions to upgrade. And what I mean by that is namely quarterback. CJ Gray just mentioned the center position, and I would say running back as well. And I think those 3 positions, if we're upgraded, we're talking about an elite team here. And I got to give him some bail on the quarterback because I think he felt like he did that with Trey Lance. And unfortunately, Trey Lance had the injury and, lost him for the season. But definitely the center position and I think the running back positions are areas that they weren't aggressive enough on to upgrade, right? And they just kind of settled for what they had. And now it's paying dividends or not paying dividends. It's showing to be more of the weaker areas of this team and really holding them back from becoming the elite roster that they could be or the elite team that they could be. So for me, that's more where I would say it's fair criticism that Kyle Shanahan is holding the 49ers back is more like the personnel stuff. I think that, I still want to be very clear. I think Kyle Shanahan is the best option for the 49ers and better than most of the people that other people think should replace Kyle Shanahan. I still want him to be the coach, not only this year, but moving forward, because I think we have the best chance to win with Kyle Shanahan there. But I wish they went more aggressively to upgrade the center position. I wish that they would have invested more higher round draft picks in better talent running backs. I think that we would be further along as a team and closer to winning a Super Bowl if those things happen.
I think so too. And when you talk about urgency and game management's really the main area in which I critique Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan is not a great, I can't say great maybe, but he's a damn good coach in my opinion. I think his offensive line is second to very few, if not any, in the NFL. And I think he is the right option for head coach. I don't think that there should be any talk about him being fired without any regard as the 49ers head coach. But his game management is questionable, and it comes down to, in a way, control. A lot of people like to label Kyle as a control freak. I also think that in a way is stretching it, but you need to understand the situation and your personnel. You're the one who developed this team. You have to understand that 2-minute drills aren't necessarily this team's forte in terms of moving the ball quickly with explosive plays. Jimmy Garoppolo is your quarterback right now, and while he's played very well this year, he's not a player that has shown consistently in his career to make explosive plays. So instead, there needs to be an increase in urgency. you've seen how Garoppolo and your offense is operated under no huddle, under that 2-minute drill kind of momentum. And I think the 49ers need to go back to that at times to create some urgency, be it at the end of the second half or the end of the first half. Even at drives at the end of the first half, there are several times where the 49ers stall and they don't end up scoring points or only score a field goal as opposed to a touchdown. And I think that a lot of it also is, again, like I said, on your personnel, Garoppolo loves to throw over the middle, which isn't the best formula when you're trying to move the ball as opposed to on the sidelines. But to me, I still think that you need to have more urgency and a little better game management in that scenario rather than controlling it to just the to what you believe you could do, and then trying to operate under that regard, because the game is different every time. It's not like the game is the same every single week. It differs every time. So that's kind of my main critique of Kyle Shanahan. And I still think that he can improve on that, but definitely he is not holding the 49ers back.
Can I ask you a question? It's
Yeah.
non-related kind of to everything, but it is. I love you're always very aware of what's going on in the league and who's available and what players are out there. If I were to say you have to put money on what the 49ers do before the trade deadline, do you think there's any movement as far as players they bring in or players they trade away? And if so, what do you think are the most likely moves that the 49ers make?
Yeah, I don't think the 49ers trade anybody away at this point, especially with the injuries that they faced. I think it's smarter to, especially if the goal is this year not to gain additional assets. The goal is to go for a championship. The goal is to make it as far as you possibly can. That's why I don't think they move anybody out. I think they like their depth, and I think their depth is valuable because of the inherent injuries that occur every year. As to who the 49ers might bring in, I think that there could be value in certain deep tackles. There are players of the caliber of a player like Tim Settle. I don't think Tim Settle's the guy that gets moved. He's in Buffalo this year. But there are certain underrated players who do well at stopping the run, who do well in situational places that can be moved for a 4th or a 5th round pick. Similar to how the 49ers got Charles Omenihu for low value last year, despite him playing meaningful snaps for the Houston Texans because they find him as a good fit in their system. I think there are certain players. I don't know, though, if the 49ers make the move this year just because they have that insulated depth already and can trust in a way, not trust, but the free agent market isn't as bad as people think. I don't think it's as dried up. You still have players like an Ndamukong Suh, like a Sheldon Richardson, like my guy Shea likes to say, on the free agent market. And I think they do trust their depth overall until they get healthy for this team to make a full run. I don't expect them to stay put necessarily in the trade deadline. I still do think that the 49ers will, as many people like to troll on Twitter, do their due diligence. But I think the 49ers have a strong enough, not strong enough, but have a deep enough roster as it is where several depth moves won't necessarily move the needle for them right now.
So your money is on there's no significant moves made at the trade.
I don't think there's a significant move because, I mean, my personal belief right now is Christian McCaffrey doesn't get traded. I don't see a team coughing up enough value for him. Maybe the Buffalo Bills do, but I don't think that teams would cough up enough value for him. And while many people, myself included, would love in either Brian Burns or Derek Brown, I don't think Derek Brown gets traded. I honestly think he's untouchable. And I think Brian Burns, it would take a boatload, much more than people believe. It'll take at least 1 first-round pick to get Brian Burns, and I honestly think it'll probably take like a 1st and a 3rd round pick. So I don't think the 49ers are going to move that.
Maybe some of the rookies.
It might require some players in return as well, which would cost the 49ers, if it's rookies, to eat dead cap because rookies have guaranteed contracts. So, yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, I think, maybe it's more hope than logic, but I do hope that they make a move because it seems like when they do make moves at the trade deadline, it usually leads to an upward trajectory of the team. So it could be the little spark that this team needs to go on.
It could be.
Here.
You're right. It could be. And real quick, Emiliano says, anytime the 49ers are in a situation where the players have to get out of bounds to manipulate the clock, he's like, uh-oh, because Jimmy has trouble hitting out routes. In a way, this is what I'm talking about with personnel. This team isn't necessarily built right to have those explosive plays because they operate so heavily over the middle of the field. They don't operate with those out routes, and also opposing teams understand the limitations of Garoppolo on those plays. Regardless, I still think there are certain plays in Shanahan's arsenal that do target those out of bounds plays, and sometimes they haven't been executed well by the quarterback or by the receivers. We'll see. But I think that regardless, having a sense of urgency, having more no huddle, and moving the ball quicker while making smarter decisions at, at every position on the field would also attribute to better efficiency in those situations.
You said it best, brother. You said it best.
Before we exit, gotta say, like and subscribe to this channel. I host my own podcast here, the 49ers Red Zone podcast. You see my name on the screen. Be sure to search that up. Follow me on Twitter as well at Rohan Chakrav. Be giving you guys all the latest 49ers news. And check out 49erswebzone.com. That's where I post a lot of insight, a lot of in-depth articles on my thoughts on how the 49ers are going right now. And lastly, don't forget to give some love over here to Suneil. Always coming in with the content, with the flash, and with the drip too. So be sure to hit
Hey,
him with a subscription. He just hit 1K a little bit ago, so show him some love as well. But guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We appreciate everybody who popped in with the chat. The chat was popping as always today, and we'll be back sometime soon with some more content.